Hi everyone, and welcome to this career Q&A session for the Reed Women in Technology Mentoring Programme. Today I have the pleasure of being joined by Nicky Green, who is a Global IT Director for the Lavazza organisation. Nicky had a really interesting career journey, starting out, I think 27 years ago with Mars.
Yep.
As a accounts payable clerk. So I'm sure there's going to be loads of interesting stuff to talk about. Nicky, over to you. If you want to give us a little bit of an overview of what that journey's been like from working in finance through to being a global IT director.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi everyone, nice to meet you. Yeah, as Kevin said, I started my career in the Mars Corporation about 27 odd years ago, and came into the Mars group working within finance, because that was when my qualifications were. And I probably spent about 10 years within the finance function doing various different roles. And then kind of got to the 10-year mark and had one of those crossroad points where I thought, I'm not really sure that this is the right career for me, even though this is where my qualifications are, and maybe I want to try something else. And I was lucky enough in the Mars Corporation, which was, because it's so big, they really kind of encourage you to take different roles, try new things, join project teams, etc. So there was never short of an opportunity really to try and have a go at something new. So I probably then spent about 2 years after that trying various different roles to try and understand what I did and didn't like. So my next best move was a short period in sales, where I thought, do you know what, I'm going to go out on the road and be field based, and at the time was selling vending machines, and quickly realized this is not for me. It's very lonely out on the road, and this is not where my skill set lays. So I then came back into the office again and did a period of time running the customer contact center. And when I did that and several other kind of operational based roles, I then got involved in a number of IT projects. And these projects were really about mainly SAP to start off with. How do we put a new SAP ERP system into the business? And my strengths really came through in terms of how do you engineer business processes in an efficient way through an application platform. And so spent a lot of years really starting to really focus my energy there. And whenever a major IT project came up, I kind of got involved. And then I was then asked by the business to look at a complete new CRM system, which so we were on SAP to start off with, and there was a desire to look at Salesforce.com. And this is kind of really where my passion then excelled. So I implemented Salesforce across what was Mars business at the time, and really became an ambassador for Salesforce in terms of, I really am a huge fan of their platform, and we slowly moved all of our CRM activity in the business over to Salesforce. But at the same time, I've kind of developed a partnership relationship with them, where I often get invited into Salesforce and talk about new ideas and innovation with them. And so really, work very closely with them on how they develop their platform going forward. And then in 2018, I guess a really unique opportunity came up, in that I was asked if I would join an inside group to prepare what was Mars Drinks for sale. Because being a coffee business within a chocolate and pet care business, I think Mars was struggling to really understand, how they could really support it in the best way going forward. And so the business got put up for sale, and Lavazza were the interested party. And so I spent 2 really interesting years there then, where a lot of people don't really get the opportunity, which is to prepare a business for sale from an IT perspective, and then transition it out of Mars into Lavazza, which was an intense year. So how do we untangle everything that we're woven into the Mars IT tapestry and get it out and allow us to stand alone, but as part of Lavazza. So 2019 was focusing on that, and at that point I was then asked to head up IT as a function in all its entirety, And I guess at that point I was thinking, why on earth am I being put here? I have no idea about one end of a network to another. I have no idea about infrastructure and security or any of that, what I would call deep IT technical knowledge. But I think what had become apparent at that point was Mars had invested a lot of money into my leadership skills. And so actually it was that I was really being primed for. And I guess we'll talk a bit more as we go through the session, but part of that journey has made me realize really that you don't have to be a technical expert in every element of what you do when you head up IT. It's about, okay, come with a reasonable amount of knowledge, be prepared to always learn, but actually, I don't need to be an expert in everything. It's about my leadership skills that I've been put into the position that I'm in today. So quickly going into Lavazza, I think I was only in the organisation for 1 year, and then they gave me another promotion, which was to look after IT for all of the Lavazza subsidiaries, so across the world. So I ended up taking on responsibility for France, Germany, US, Australia. And then now we're just at another crossroads where Lavazza has actually just acquired a new business called Maxi Coffee, which is based in France. So I shall go through another integration project, which is on a very large scale. That company is very big and has about 1,500 employees. Before then separating Lavazza into 2 separate businesses, to which one of them I will head up IT on. Wow. So there's my whistle-stop tour.
Yeah, I'm sure there's lots there that people want to ask about, so feel free to get involved, guys. From my perspective, whilst it sounds like you're in an organisation that absolutely create opportunities for people to move departments and get rid of those things, nobody else in the business has done what you've done and gone and become that global IT director. So what were the if there was other individuals currently now working outside of tech but thinking there are areas of the organisation that might like to explore, tech might be one of them, might be others. Is there anything that you swiftly did to educate yourself about the parts of the business and to make sure that you were visible to those parts of the business, so when opportunities came up, you were one of the people that they would come to and ask about them?
Yeah, so 2 things, I think. So one was from the project perspective. So even though at the time before I got into IT, I was sitting in other normal business functions, I always took the opportunity to get involved in, if there was ever an IT project, to try to kind of expand my interest. I knew it was an area that held my interest. So it's like, well, let's try and expand my skills a little bit by at least representing my function in an IT project. So that kind of helped me develop some of my skills around applications. The other thing I think was relationship and networking. So kind of always made it a thing to make sure that I build really good connections across the business with various different stakeholders, and to really make it known about what my passion was, what my development needs were. I've often through my career had internal mentors, for example, just to help me continuously get better and better, and to really, I guess, give me exposure. Because you want to be in that position where when they think about who's right or who's next for something, you come front of mind.
Yeah, you talk about building internal networks and relationships. I can see obviously you are in an office today, but I assume that isn't the standard, 365 days a year that you're actually in an office, a bit more remote working. Do you think if you were going on that journey now, things would be slightly more difficult to build those relationships with people that you're not necessarily in and around all the time?
I mean, this is an interesting topic that we could probably talk for hours on, right? Because so for me personally, I am not a work from home person. So my energy comes from being around people, and so actually I actively choose to come into the office every day, unless there's something that I really need to work on that requires alone time or real focus. I think there is a lot to be said around the move to home working in terms of really losing this team camaraderie, the what I call the coffee station chat, where ideas naturally kind of come to life and chat and networking naturally happens. So I am not one for promoting home working. However, it works. It does work in certain situations. the other things that I think I do, which I think is really important as well, is, networking is just not just about internally in your own business. So I do a lot of things outside of my own business as well. So I'm a member of Gartner. I don't know whether any of you know about the Gartner organization, but I'm heavily involved with them in that I have my own mentor and coach, which I've had the same one for about 3.5 years now, who I get a lot of value out of. I go to a lot of events to constantly educate myself on what's going on out in the marketplace, and what's new, and what are other IT leaders doing, what are the challenges that they face, so that we can support each other and help each other. I do some stuff in schools at the moment around going to talk to people about my career. It's aimed at young girls, so trying to gain interest in young girls, developing interest in STEM type roles. So I think it's just as important to be looking at your network outside of the organisation as it is in.
Yeah, I'm aware that Greg wants to ask a question, but I've got one final part to ask about that, because you mentioned times you spend outside the business growing your networks and things. Is that something that you've had to do in your own personal time, or is that something that you think should be factored into the day-to-day responsibilities of your job? And then if that isn't already on the table for somebody, how do you think they should speak to their employer about freeing up time for them to go and do external things?
Yeah, so I think it's a bit of both. So I do invest a bit of my own time into my own development because it's important to me. So, for example, at the moment, I work in an Italian business. I'm learning Italian at the moment to try and at least be able to have some conversations with my my peer group in Turin. I choose to do that, so I do it in my own time. When it comes to the actual IT exploration outside of here, I use company time, and I've got a boss who's very supportive of that. But I think there's a couple of things for me. One, it's very easy to get tied into the day job and the constant things that go on in an organization, that people will always walk up to your desk and say, can you help with this, or this doesn't work, or this project didn't go as well as I thought. You have to be a little bit disciplined with your time in that I am going to make sure that I do XYZ per year, because it's important to me in my own development and my contribution back as an IT leader. So I think you have to be very intentional about making sure that you carve out that time. Secondly, I think from your line manager's perspective, it's just about having the conversation with them about what you'd like to do and why, and making them see the value of it. What I always do is I'll always tell my boss about, look, this is what I'm planning to do. For example, I'm going to the Gartner Leadership Conference in Barcelona for a week in November. So I'll tell him, what's on the agenda, why I'm going there, what I plan to learn. And then I'll always bring back. So, in my contract, I guess, with my line manager is, look, let me do this. I come back and I'll talk to the rest of the team about what I learned there. What could we do in Lavazza that's different now that I learned at that conference? And so I think if you can really engage your line manager or fellow team colleagues around, why am I doing this, and what's the value that it's going to bring, then actually you'll get the support that you need to go do it.
Cool. Greg, I'll come to you now. If your question is still relevant.
Thanks, Kevin. Nicky, love the journey. I've come from a very non-IT background into a CIO role. How do you deal with imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I have it. Believe me. Especially, I think the biggest bout of imposter syndrome I got was when I was asked to head up the whole of IT for when we transitioned out of Mars in Lavazza, and I can remember thinking, oh God, someone's gonna find me out soon. How on earth did I find myself in this position? But again, I think it's you kind of have to. Every so often, I think you have to take a step back and look at your own journey and look how far you've come, right? So I think, well, I've done a lot of things over my career to earn my stripes, and you need to remind yourself of what those things are and how people have valued those. And also, I'm not afraid anymore of telling other people, what I don't know. So I'm not afraid anymore of putting my hand up in a meeting and saying I don't have the answer to that, or admitting that I'm not an expert in all elements of IT. Because actually I think more people have more of a respect for you for being honest like that, rather than trying to make out that you are this expert in everything. And like I touched on before, the one thing that I do spend a lot of time on is people leadership, and making sure I invest my time in a strong team around me who are the experts, who I can pull on when I need it. But I am, from my point of view, I don't think imposter syndrome ever goes away. I think you just have to remind yourself, as I say, of the journey that you've been on, how far you've come, and that, yeah, at the end of the day, you deserve to be in the position that you're in.
Love it. Thanks, Nicky.
Yeah, thanks. Good question, Greg. It ties in nicely to the question that I was about to ask next anyway, particularly referencing the fact that you mentioned that probably one of the biggest challenges was that project where you were suddenly given responsibility for all areas of IT that you weren't an expert in. So your main wheelhouse was business systems, Salesforce, SAP.
Yeah.
How technical have you had to become in terms of the other areas? And other than, let's say, surrounding yourself with the right people, what have you done to kind of bridge any of those skills gaps?
So I know enough to get by, I think. And so what I will often do is, especially in that transition year where I had to get at least a basic understanding of many areas of IT, beg your pardon, in order that I could do things like understand the strategy for how we would exit out of Mars, in order that I could develop the right roles that I needed to set up the right organization. So I needed to know the basics. And so it was no more complicated than getting certain people in the organization to a room and asking, drawing on whiteboards and sitting down, asking how the basics work, and asking, how to explain how things worked, doing a little bit of online research. So I will often, be on Google saying, oh my gosh, I've heard this terminology, don't know what it means, got to go find out for myself. And then and it's no more real complex than that. I've not done any formal training. I do think the Gartner thing really helped me, because that's at the point where I joined the Gartner group. And they have really helped in that, they have so many subject matter experts that when I am really stuck with something, I'll go to my coach and say, do you know what I've got to do? For example, one of my first challenges was around building an IT budget for OPEX and CAPEX, and literally starting from scratch. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's not so much I don't know how to build a budget. I worked in finance, but what's the norm in terms of percentage versus cost versus the rest of the organizations, things like that I just wouldn't have known. And actually just going to them and saying, okay, is there anybody that can help me with this? And the answer 99% of the time was yeah. And they would put me in contact with somebody, I would learn from them, and then you kind of just like you have it under your belt then, and I now don't need to go back over that ground again. So yeah, I think it's about being curious, it's about being inquisitive, I always think there's always something to learn. Doesn't matter how you go about it, I always try and learn something new.
Yeah. Obviously you've been in now this sector, transitioning to tech over, like I say, these last couple of decades, so the landscape's probably changed quite a lot, and I don't like to dwell on all the negatives and the challenges that people talk about in terms of being a woman in tech. But now that you're in a position of influence and you're leading teams and contributing to people strategy as well, is there anything that you have actively done differently to kind of make things better for people that want to follow the same path that you have done?
Yeah, I think so. One thing I'll talk to you about is, so as Lavazza is heading up, they've launched what we call a gap-free program. Which is in line with the United Nations Sustainable Goals for 2030. And as part of that, Goal 5 is around gender equality, which has now evolved a bit more into diversity and inclusion. And I am kind of one of the faces of that for Lavazza. So again, this is something that I kind of take away from the day job and represent in Lavazza as an additional activity. But my passion here is around a couple of things, really. It's trying to encourage more females into not just IT roles, but STEM roles generally across the board. So I will spend time talking to females in this organisation about my own career path and some of the challenges I've had and how they can overcome them, and trying to help people understand that it's achievable. I do external speaking in schools to try and encourage young females that this is something that, you know, is interesting, because, you know, I'll give you a quick example. My daughter came home last week from school having done really well in a computer science exam and is not going to take it as an option. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a real shame. And she's like, well, it's boring. And I'm like, okay, so, you know, why is nothing being done in school to paint a picture of how IT can be exciting and how you can have a really good career in it and how it's going to open up so many opportunities? So I'm trying to do some work to fill that gap. The other thing is, and it goes hand in hand with this, is one of the things that was really challenging across my career as a female and as a mum as well, is how on earth do you balance a full-time job in the type of work that I do, and try and run a family and everything else? And because for me, this is part of what's stopping a lot of females coming through the funnel, is because I can't tell you the amount of colleagues that I've had in the past that have been females, got to maybe 1 year, 6 months of returning back to work and then gone, can't do this, it's too much. And so, you know, so a big part of what we're doing in our gap-free program is how do we help females and mums through those early years in terms of being a bit more flexible, in terms of changing our ways of working, so that they can be mum and, you know, support those early years, but still go on to have a career that doesn't stop just because they've had children, and that they then have to retrain for, you know, 5-10 years later when the kids are, you know, grown up. So we're really looking into that as an organisation about, you know, this is such a short space of time. Let's nurture these people through that time so that we retain our talent, we continue to grow it, and we still got that resource at the end of the journey. So that's also something that I'm supporting, looking into, because that's probably been the biggest challenge that I've had throughout this whole thing. It's not been learning about IT. It's not been about learning to be a people leader and what's important in all of that. It's about how on earth do I balance everything that goes on in home life and work life, and be able to feel like you're adding value in both places.
Yeah. In response to your daughter's statement about tech being boring, then, what would you say is the most surprising part of your job that people wouldn't realise, or the best opportunities that you've had as a result of working in this sector?
I think just the amount of change I've seen. If I go back to my very early days, even when I first entered into IT, you know, we were the team really that kept everyone with a laptop and kept people being able to do their general day-to-day work, right? We were often also the team that got moaned at for everything that's wrong in the world. I think the exciting part of being in IT now is that there's this business realization that IT is now the gateway for most kind of business evolution. So everything that we're doing in our strategic plan has got an IT element to it, whether that means, you know, technology in our vending machines, whether that be, you know, looking for more efficient business processes. How do we make sure that we're constantly connecting with our customers in a digital world? Every element we can see opportunity for us to keep developing our own skills, to add value, and to be recognized. And I think, you know, one of the big kind of moments I think in my career was when COVID happened and everybody got sent home. And you know, we were one of the early adopters of Microsoft Teams and all of that platform of technology, and we got something like 750 people working from home in a matter of about a week. And that was kind of, and the amount of strong feedback that we had was, oh my God, look what IT did, how they made that happen. And it's literally from there, we've just gone from strength to strength. And so I think generally the business is starting to see us in a completely different light now of a team that really is critical now, not just well, yeah, okay, so we need some IT people because we all need a computer.
Yeah, and you've obviously already mentioned things like getting to go to the Gartner Symposium in Barcelona, and I'm sure some of the trips to head office in Italy have been on
Oh
the cars
yeah,
around
love
us
going to
for
Italy.
years.
Yeah,
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 good
love
stuff.
going to Italy.
Natasha had her hand up for a second. I don't know if there was a question there, Natasha.
Hi, yeah, there was. Hi, sorry for joining a little bit late. Had a
That's okay, no
meeting.
worries.
Nice to meet you.
And you?
I've really interesting comment about, as you say, transitioning women in IT. I think one
Yeah.
thing is about being in the environment. Once you make up your mind, this is it, this is where I want to be, you sort of, as you say, network and mentor and move around that. But then the other element is actually, okay, I'm a family woman, or I want to start a family, and that's definitely sort of, I worry about that. I worry about the reality of dealing with both things, but I don't want to have to give that up. So I really am glad to hear. I was thinking about, what can I do? Like you're saying, there is a problem, but what can I do to make a change and to make it easier for women coming through? And everyone's going to think about the same thing if you're working in IT, right? So
Yeah.
no, it's great. It's great that you're thinking about that. What made you persevere? Did you come across that hurdle in your career, and how did you manage it, and what made you sort of persevere through it?
I think probably the earliest thing was that I knew that, I absolutely adore my kids, of course I do, but I knew that being a stay-at-home mum was not going to be for me. So that's step one, right? Okay, I need to work for my own sanity, for what I want out of life, and for what I want my life to be. So that was step one. Then I can honestly tell you, yeah, it was difficult. So I felt that I had to make a lot of compromises. So, I would always be the mum that was running to the school late. I would always be the mum that wasn't at the school play. I would find myself in leadership team meetings making excuses for needing to leave early, but not wanting to say it's because I'm picking my kids up.
Yeah.
And I kind of look back on all of that and think, that's terrible. Why wasn't I able to do that? And so I guess it's about using my own experience in the females that I do have on the team now to adopt a different way of working. And I've got one particular female in my team who I can honestly say to you is the best project manager you will ever come across. We paid for her 2 years ago to go through her MBA. She's top talent, and she's got the ability to be probably my successor, for example. She's just had a baby, and she's come to me and she's like, oh gosh, wow, I'm in a bit of a difficult situation. I've got a baby. The Basingstoke office that we're based at is not near to my home. I want to come back, but I don't know how I'm going to make this work.
Yeah.
Now, myself and the CIO are developing between us a creative plan of, okay, right, do you know what? The next 3 years, 4 years till her little one goes to school are going to be a bit tough for her. But how do we make sure that we've still got her at the end of 4 years? Because we know what talent she is, and we've already invested a lot in her.
Yeah.
So we're looking at, okay, how about coming to the office just 1.5 or 2 days a week out of the 5? How about on the days that you do come, starting later and finishing at certain times, or whatever. Giving her the reassurance and the flexibility that she needs, that should, something need to be done with the children, then of course that's really understood. All we're actually interested in is, as long as we're clear with you on what expectations are, then actually you can manage your own time and work around what you need to. So I think it's about just having the conversations with these females about that you're supported, and we'll find a way together. Rather than, well, the HR document says no, we don't do that. Well, shame, because actually then you're going to lose the best people that you've got, that you've already invested a ton of money in, and they'll go elsewhere.
Right.
Excellent.
Thank you.
I've got a question that was asked last week, but we didn't have time to, or I missed it, shall I say, which I think is still relevant to yourself, actually. So obviously you're here today, sharing your story. You seem to be very natural and comfortable doing this. At what point in your career did you start going out and doing like public speaking, and was it always as straightforward for you as it seems to be today? And if not, how did you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, well, there's a really good story to this, actually, which I'm happy to share, because let me rewind back probably. So how old is my daughter now? She's 13. So probably about, say, 10-11 years ago. If I'd have told you that I would have absolutely filled me with dread to even speak in a room of 6 or 7 people. No, very little confidence. Definitely would never want to be the person who kind of put their hand up, always afraid of maybe saying something wrong or something that, you know, wasn't correct. So I guess a lack of confidence and a lack of self-belief always meant that I would never put myself forward. And the thought of ever doing some kind of presentation or standing in front of anybody, I can't tell you the fear that was there. And then at one particular point, I always think in your career, is as much as, you know, you're responsible for kind of creating your own route, it's always great if you've got somebody that recognizes something in you and can help kind of open up the opportunities a little bit. And at the time I had a line manager who was kind of pushing me a little bit, like, come on, I think you're capable of more. There's probably, in terms of being promoted within the Mars organization at the time, I think there's more space for you to grow than you probably think there is. And this opportunity came up. It was to go to the US as part of I was a mid manager at that point, and they were looking for 3 people to present during this managers week. And I did my usual. So I opened the email, saw that they were requesting for speakers, and thought, no thanks, and deleted the email. The next day I got into work and I had an email from the HR head in the US, and she was like, oh, hi, Nicky, thanks so much for volunteering to speak at the, and I was thinking, oh my God, what on earth, how? And I can remember looking behind me, seeing my boss sat behind me, like smirking as if to say, and basically he had pushed me to do this presentation, and I thought, and I gave him quite a bit of abuse at the time, was like, I'm not doing it, I can't do it. And he was like, you can do it, and I think it's going to be a great opportunity for you. So I then found myself in a position where, okay, I'm not going to be able to get out of this, so therefore I have to find a way of being able to do it. So this particular presentation, I thought, well, what's going to make me most comfortable in delivering something like this, where I'm completely out of my comfort zone? And so at the time, my son works for Mercedes Formula One now, but he used to do karting in his childhood. And so I made my presentation a theme around racing, because I thought, you know what, it'll make me really comfortable, that I can talk to racing a bit, and I can bring my family element into it while still getting across the points around a business change that I've made. Anyway, I delivered this presentation, and worked myself up into a complete stupor about it before it actually happened. But I delivered it on the day and got immense praise for it, and I guess it just gave me the boost that I needed, like, oh my gosh, I can do it. I now need to utilize this and keep doing it. So I need to keep pushing myself out of my comfort zone, because one presentation is not going to solve it. So now I'm going to start volunteering for things in the hope that I get better and better. And then I think 5 years ago now, I was asked to present at Dreamforce in San Francisco. So just to show you how far that I came with it, I presented on the main stage in front of 10,000 people. And I look back and I think, God, I would never in a million years have thought that was possible. But just through pushing myself out of my comfort zone a little bit and keep doing that until eventually I became comfortable with it, now it doesn't bother me in the slightest.
Amazing story. No, thank you. And I'm very conscious of time, and I think we've kept you for longer than we're supposed to already.
Okay.
There's a million and one things that we could get into, and more detail we could question people in. But I think, yeah, for today, thank you very much for your time. Real pleasure
you're
to
welcome.
speak to you.
It's really good to speak to you.
I will, when I upload this to our video channel, I will put Nicky's LinkedIn profile URL in the name, and I'll put my email address there. So if there is anybody that has any questions after watching the video, wants to find a way to reach out to myself or Nicky to ask those questions, then feel free to do so. But other than that, thank you very much all. Have a great day.
Definitely.
And we'll
thank
we'll
you.
catch
Lovely
next
to meet
time.
you all virtually.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Nicky.
Kevin. Thanks, Nicky.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care.